Hallo. Hallo. Ja, ich kann auch die Sieg sein. Are you? Very well. Ja, ja, 6 ja. Ja.
I think that's responsible for reporting. I see, you see that was. Somebody else on mobile. But there was like 30.
I don't know if we will have
Morning, you. Thank you.
What is issued through that. If you don't want to,
I don't need to.
you don't need to.
Okay, then it's okay. Then I can relax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Also, yeah.
So
Ready.
we are ready. We are ready. We are ready.
I think the majority of people is going to be online.
Yeah, I think so too. Hi there, how are you?
Good, thanks to yourself.
Very well.
Good, awesome, thank you.
No, I don't think we will have maybe 20.
Yeah,
Maybe not even that.
Open the door. Okay, John, the she does.
Something else. He's going low. Must mess it up. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
I'll get permission from you.
Legend. Is that the problem? So, yeah. Can be really streaming soon. Okay, good evening. Evening, ladies and gents. Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's information evening for the Country Club. Obviously, two audiences tonight. Those who came out tonight, thank you very much. And as also tonight we are streaming via our YouTube link. So trust everyone on YouTube can hear me clearly. But welcome everyone, and thank you much for joining us. So tonight we, as set out in the agenda, we're going to go through three topics. And again, please, it's just an update. Topics are the solar project, the paddleboard project update, as well as just update on the strategy. Most of the content will be discussed around the solar. There's a lot of information around that. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Jonko Lawrence, who's part of Eurotech, who is our consulting engineers that we appointed to assist the club determining and going through the tender process and determining where we are now with the proposed solution. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Lawrence to come and join us.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jonker Lawrence from Beartech Consulting Engineers. I'm a qualified electrical engineer. So we are quite far in the process with the solar tender process and education. We were appointed to assist the golf club in the education process, which is quite complex on the system. So I'm going to try and condense a whole lot of information for you this evening. You'll see that the slides are quite extensive as well. I'm going to touch on most of the things, but the information is left in the slides for you as a reference. So our discussion is going to focus mostly our agenda for the evening is just a basic understanding of the system proposed for the golf club, first of all, just so everyone understands the goals, what the golf club is trying to achieve, first of all. Then secondly, the funding options we as the consultants and the golf club looked at together, certain risks and rewards associated with that. Then we're going to look at the tender process followed to date with the successful tender being announced a little bit later on. So I'm going to try and be very quick. So first of all, just a basic overview of what the golf club is currently planning. So the golf club is planning on diversifying the electrical supply. Obviously, we know with first of all, energy security is a big concern in Swaziland and South Africa as a whole in terms of load shedding, power failures. The golf club, for example, experiences long-term power failures. The second leg of this is the cost associated with energy. It's an ever-rising cost. Just as a reference, the last 20 years average annual increase in electrical tariffs by Eskom was on average 11.5%, which is obviously extremely high considering, with also heating costs being added daily, as we know in the news. So the goal of the country club is first of all to look at a hybrid energy solution. Hybrid solution, as we see as consists of our solar PV plant. Our solar PV plant is geared at a cheaper alternative of generating energy during the daytime periods, mainly focused on energy savings. Coupling that with the battery system, the aim of the battery is then obviously to store any excess energy being generated from solar plants and using that energy either during periods of load shedding or extended power failures, as well as performing energy arbitrage is a large focus for the golf club as well. Just explaining arbitrage a little bit is the golf club is currently on a time of use tariff with the City of Tshwane, meaning that there are certain periods of more expensive energy usage, other periods much cheaper. For example, evenings, off-peak periods much cheaper than daytime standard and early evening peak periods. So the aim of the battery system in that regard is to essentially offset your peak energy usage for cheaper energy alternatives. So what the goal in this instance is to use the PV plant to charge the battery where the energy is available. If not available, the battery can be charged during off-peak periods in limited quantities. That's your cheapest tariff, looking at around 130 on average, summer and winter with City of Tshwane. And then discharging that battery during peak periods, which is usually between 5 and 8 a.m. in the evenings. Just to give you some reference, in winter times, Tshwane's peak tariff has now climbed up to over 7 Rand. In summer periods, it's sitting at around 3 Rand. So you can just do the calculation for yourself. That offset creates a large cash saving for the golf club. That was the first goal. And secondly, obviously, energy security. Coupling that then with diesel generator. Currently, there is a small generator installed at the golf club. It's focus on bare minimum to get the clubhouse running during extended power failures. The proposal was then to obviously upgrade the generator to not only provide limited power during these periods of power failures, but providing full operational capabilities to the golf club, as well as being able to charge the batteries during extended power outages when the PV is not sufficient. So that is the goal, ultimately, of the golf club as a whole. Is just when we look at that entire system playing out. Now, before we move into the process followed, we focused on the final solution, just to give you a brief summary of where we're sitting with the final proposals. So currently we're looking at a 478 kilowatt peak solar system. So the solar system, currently looking at mounting it on carport structures at the southern end of the carport due to the trees sitting at the bottom here, and the remainder of the capacity being installed on the roof. So, sorry for doing that on the microphone. So, the reason being, your carports provide a rather more expensive solution, but a double-up solution in terms of creating shading for your vehicles, as well as utilizing unused space for solar production. The structures being considered are shown here just for reference on a previous project to provide easy access to your vehicle, while also providing the area for the solar PV modules generation. Then looking at the battery system, currently we're looking at a plus minus 1 megawatt hour battery system. This system will then provide both the functionality of the energy arbitrage as discussed earlier, as well as energy backup. Then the inverter capacity is just inserted here for reference. This is dictated by the clubhouse's supply side. And then the 350 kVA prime rated generator being planned for integration into the system. Just to give you an idea, we've given you a look at what these battery containers generally look like after installation. This is one project recently completed. But these final designs are being or will be finalized. This is just some sort of reference so that you can see what's lying ahead. So the big question that the golf club faced was, how do we finance this? So there are currently, unfortunately, way too many options on the table for solar PV plant funding. So I'm just going to give you a rundown of all of them. I'm not going to read all these sentences, so bear with me. First consideration is a power purchase agreement. So what a power purchase agreement entails, in short, is you have an IPP or EPC. IPP is an independent power producer, engineering, procurement, and construction company. These two usually partner up and provide you with a contract, a power purchase agreement. Under that contract, you essentially buy your electricity from a plant that they construct on your premises at a lower cost than that of the municipality, with no capital expense from the client, in this case, the golf club. The second consideration is a rent-to-own solution. So a rent-to-own solution focuses more on you, the client, or the golf club in this case, owning the plant. Usually contracts between 5 to 10 years. It's a set monthly payment. It's not buying energy from a different supplier. It's a set monthly payment. After 10 years or 5 years or whatever the contract period is, the plant belongs to you, and maintenance and insurance, all those types of things get shifted over to you as the client for the remainder of the lifetime of the plant. Just for consideration, solar PV plants are considered to have a lifetime between 20 to 30 years based on solar panel life. Obviously, things like inverters and batteries have shorter lifespans, get replaced throughout the lifetime of the plant. The third consideration was a capital expense. So obviously that is the most straightforward. You as the golf club then buy the plant, you own it, you pay an expert to service and maintain it. But all the costs, everything lie with you as the owner, and you own and operate that plant for the lifetime of the plant. And then lastly was bank finance. So this is just hand in hand with the capital expense. Instead of having your own cash upfront to fund such a project, you engage with your bank or financial institution to get a loan. So for reference, I've added a lot of notes on each of these solutions. As you can see, there's quite a lot. I'm just going to give it to you in a nutshell quickly. So the power purchase agreement, the main advantages of a power purchase agreement is the fact that you've got no capital outlay on the project and you don't own the plant. So while it's being installed on your premises, the plant's owned and operated by the IPP, and you agree to buy the energy from them. The main advantage with that is obviously, first of all, capital that you don't have to spend, and the risk associated with owning and operating such a plant. It's a common misconception that these things are quite simple to own and operate. Someone in the industry for quite a while, it is completely the opposite. Solar has been oversimplified on the market, and the risk associated with owning and operating such a plant is quite excessive. For example, your batteries after 10 to 15 years reach end of life. That constitutes around 50 to 60% of your plant costs. And most PV plants statistically have been proven to produce less than 80% of their true capacity after 3 years due to maintenance issues. So that's the main risk component in the PPA. The main disadvantages of this sort of extended contract period is usually a 20 to 30-year contract period. With the fact that you've got a minimum offtake then that you have to buy monthly from the IPP. Another disadvantage is your savings are much less than when you would have spent the capital yourself. Now, as we discussed with the golf club as well, the main consideration when we look at these financing options is your risk versus reward. So obviously with your highest risk, you're going to get your highest reward. So CapEx, your highest risk, yes, you get by far your highest reward. The PPA lowers that risk, yes, along with lowering your savings. But it's still, in terms of risk management, that is where the decision is made, risk versus reward. The rent-to-own option, once again, it's a zero capital outlay in the beginning. It has the same advantages of PPA with a few key differences. First of all, while the PPA includes everything, operations and maintenance, component replacements, everything for that period, because it's been owned and operated by the IPP, the rent-to-own takes that responsibility for only the contract period, which is 5 to 10 years. So that's once that contract runs out, you are then again responsible for that. So it's once again a higher reward. You have more savings, but it's a higher risk for you as the golf club as well. Another key component to consider here as well is the fact that usually your expense, your monthly expenses and your annual total expense for year one, for example, is usually more than your actual energy savings that you're going to earn in that period. It's just because of the shortened contract, where with the PPA, usually you are rather more cash flow positive in year one. Another key advantage is it's a shorter contract period, 5 to 10 years, as I said, compared to a PPA. But once again, one of your disadvantages is after 10 or 5 years, the risk falls to you in terms of insurance, operations and maintenance, etc. And lastly, the CapEx and finance, they go hand in hand. It's fairly straightforward. Highest risk, but high reward. All the operations and maintenance, all replacement, everything lies with the golf club. The service level agreement needs to be in place with whichever company you need to contract to maintain this plant. And as the industry goes, we in the industry know that operations and maintenance has become an afterthought for a lot of EPCs. I wouldn't say necessarily the EPCs that we work with, but there are risks associated with that. So just as a rough example of what we considered in terms of risk and reward, when we look at a CapEx versus financed versus PPA solution, just in terms of the money, is the fact that you can see here the CapEx, the orange solution here, your benefits far outweigh your PPA and your finance options. You have your capital expense in year 0. You use all your energy savings to pay back your cash either into your bank accounts or into a financial institution after a certain amount of time. You have paid off your system and then you get all the benefits. Obviously, this is inclusive of maintenance costs on an annual basis, etc., etc. The reason why we've got such a steep slope is in a CapEx solution, the only thing that you're concerned about when you look at your savings is the fact that the ESCOM increases, or the percentage of the ESCOM increases. So, for example, if your ESCOM tariff increases are 11% each year, that's why you see such exponential growth, because 11% each year, your savings is going to increase quite a lot. Versus the finance option, obviously you can see your cash flow negative essentially for 10 years, and then after you start owning the plant, your benefits start increasing exponentially, once again for the same reason as with the CapEx. With the PPA solution, it's a different story altogether. Once again, no capital outlay. You never cash flow negative, you always cash flow positive. But your slope is very, very slow compared to your other solutions. The reason for this, plain and simple, is the way a PPA works. They are planned for, you've got a certain tariff at ESCOM that increases by whatever percentage they decide on that year or gets approved that year. With PPA, you've got a lower tariff from the get-go compared to the ESCOM tariff, which increases at a lower percentage each year as well, but it does increase. And for that reason, you see the slow slope here. Your savings do increase year on year, and it's a very lucrative savings still, but it is much lower than your CapEx. Hence the risk reward that we spoke about. So in a nutshell, that was just the considerations from the Golf Club and us as consultants in terms of what solutions we propose going forward and how we are going to implement this plant that the club is looking at. So moving on to the tender process. So the Golf Club went out on tender, invited tenderers to submit proposals. And once these proposals were received, that's where Bureautech got involved. It must be stated clearly that it's extremely difficult to actually adjudicate any of these EPCs or proposals because the options are limitless in terms of what variables they offer. How do you even bring these things together to be able to adjudicate it in a fair and actually substantial way? So at that point, our discussions with the Golf Club focused on, let's look at the proposal submitted at that time as is, identify 2 preferred tenderers from those existing proposals, and then re-engage with those 2 preferred tenderers and take the process further. So initially, that's why we focused on our assessment criteria as listed here, and I'll go through that now, is the fact that the proposals varied widely. So we needed to get a grasp on how we can actually compare these in a fair manner. So first of all, we focused on the technical compliance, so reviewing of equipment. For example, Tier 1 modules that are listed as Tier 1 companies on the Bloomberg list, something that is very important, obviously, in terms of longevity, being able to have a company that you can rely on for the next 20 years, to be able to honor warranties, etc. So that was one of the main criteria. That's just an example. There were a lot of things covered in this technical compliance, from inverter technology to solar PV module technology to battery technology. All of these things were looked at by Bureautech and assessed on our industry knowledge and adjudicated to the 18% here are listed. Then the tender due diligence. So this was something that you do in any tender, obviously, the due diligence on the company itself, their experience in the industry, references in the industry, their company profiles, all those type of things were assessed, graded, and formed 12% of our final grading criteria. And then we had to look at these options in a financially fair way. And this is where the difficulty came in, because you had companies offering PPAs. This company offered a 10-year PPA, this company offered a 20-year PPA, this one offered a 25-year PPA. This guy didn't offer a PPA, but only a rent to own. So bringing all those types of things together was quite difficult. So we decided to give grading over all of these proposals, try and compare them, just add a weight to them to see whether the company as a whole performs well. So one of the larger components was the capex price, same thing, and the PPA rates, the percentage annual increase. This is something that has to do with the PPA and the rent to own solutions. PPA buyout costs were compared, and the net present value presented by the company at that stage, how they would assess the plant to perform for the next 20 years or 10 years, whatever they listed as their contractor, were compared and graded, leading us to the following results. So for anonymity's sake, the tenderers were just listed from 1 to 6. One of the tenderers didn't submit the proposal on time, it wasn't assessed. According to the golf club, our assessment yielded the following results. We identified tenderer 1 and 2 with that proceeded to stage 2. They were closely matched, and with further information, we could proceed and finalize our adjudication process. Just a short summary of what we received in the first phase of proposals. As you can see, the capex values were closely linked, except for the two outliers essentially. But as you can see, we didn't have, for example, a split between PV and battery costs. So what we tend to do is, because the battery and PV have separate goals in mind, the battery is for backup and for energy saving purposes. Your PV is just for energy saving purposes. Your PV is much more predictable compared to your battery, for example. We prefer to split the costs. Obviously, we couldn't do that for all tenderers involved. As you can see there, as you can see here, not all of them, for example, submitted PPA options. We looked at we've got listed the annual increases expected here or proposed here, and then the monthly lease options. As you can see, some of the tenderers also didn't provide lease options. So the grading shown on the previous slide was constructed in such a way as to ensure that if a company did, for example, not submit both PPA and rent to own, they do not fall out of the running, that it doesn't affect it wholeheartedly, that they just scratched with a low percentage. That was the whole goal in mind there. And then just as a rough estimate here, we can just see comparatively what the sizes of the systems were that were proposed, which also creates some difficulty because obviously there's a difference in production and all these types of variables that start coming in, but they were at least relatively close enough to each other to be able to assess, except for tender of 4 years, which was a completely different profile. Starting with phase 2 then. And phase 2 extended through 4 rounds essentially. Just to note, but I'm going to summarize it as it was treated throughout these 4 phases of 4 rounds essentially. So the 2 tenderers were then approached, requested to submit their proposals in a way that is standardized. So standard or identical terms. So such as 20-year PPA, we focused on a 20-year PPA. And a 10-year rent to own and a 5-year rent to own, for example. Things like system sizes, everything was suggested to keep the proposals as close as possible to each other to be able to be assessed this. And additional information was requested should there have been something missing, especially on the technical side or on the company profile side. Our assessment criteria changed here because at this point, because the proposals were aligned, we could perform detailed financial comparisons with the various companies. So the goal there was the only way we can, for example, compare PPA solutions on a fair basis is a net present value calculation over a 20-year period. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it involves taking an estimate of the club's usage, imposing the PV on that, seeing what the energy savings would translate to, and then translate that to a cost. So an annual saving that changes every year due to ESCOM forecasted increases, PPA forecasted increases, and in the case with the returns, O&M cost changes. So we would forecast the costs for the contract period. So in the case for a return 5 years, for a PPA 20 years, we would forecast the net present value of that plant and be able to identify which plant performs financially the best in the interest of the golf club. So nothing from the previous phase were excluded. The tender due diligence and the equipment offered remained and with the same weights. Additional information was just asked. The CapEx price took a role for 14% weight in this adjudication process, but it wasn't the most centralized one. It was just once again to get an idea of what these companies charge for such a PV plant that is comparable to another one. The net present value for the rate to own options and the PPA options ended up being the defining criteria because we were looking at the financial benefit to the golf club as the technical due diligence was essentially completed at this stage. The results from that from phase 2 ended up being a PPA. We ended up looking at tender 2 with a net present value of 11 million. So just note this net present value is just a grading or adjudication variable. It's not an indication of how the plant necessarily would perform. It's just a way to get these plants evaluated in equal terms. The rent to own tender 1 emerges the favourite. At this point, this is where we had more in-depth discussions around what financial option the golf club is considering to proceed with. So at this point, the PPA became the preferred option. The rent to owns weren't excluded at this point, that were still being included in assessments, but the golf club, with our assistance, decided that the PPA would be the best way forward. So with that in mind, we proceeded to engage with tender 2, get updated and final proposals to be reviewed, especially in terms of contract details that weren't available at this point. So we asked for more detailed contractual information on this. We proceeded with tender 2 at that point, and I'm not going to run through all of this information, but just in summary, tender 2 was the preferred option all the way through, and then Ben will elaborate on this, but during negotiations, certain things changed in terms of the negotiation between the golf club and the tenderer, where we went back for the final and fourth iteration of phase 2 in the adjudication to discuss or to further involve tender 1 as an alternative to tender 2. So I'm not going to go through this. This is for reference purposes. The key points that I want to look at is just the fact that the options we looked at each tender, the 5-year rent to own. The 5 plus 5-year rent to own refers to the way they structured it as a 5-year plus a 5 year at a certain tariff, and then after 5 years the tariff lowers, and then a variable PPA over 20 years. Then tender 2, at this point we assessed only the three PPAs. The rent to own option was not included at that point. Just a few things to note here. As you'll see, the estimated savings from each of the tenderers as proposed, as contained in the proposals are listed here for your reference. And then you'll see our BRT calculated savings in this line, as well as the submitted net present values from each of the proposals with our calculated net present values. So the key difference here, and that's what I just want to point out, when you look at this later, is the fact that BRT tends to be much more conservative in this regard, first of all. And secondly, our estimations focused more on creating an even playing field rather than looking at the feasibility. Although essentially it looks at both. BRT also had slightly older data, so we could easily get a level playing field in terms of the expected performance of this plant, not financial, just production performance, using our data because we could assess everyone on an equal playing field. So the rest of the table summarizes key items in these proposals, such as the tariff increases each year that were received, the annual expected costs for buying energy each year, the annual, in certain cases such as tender 1, the battery is not included in the PPA, so the battery forms a rent-to-own solution, the option to extend it, which is important to note here. Expected monthly O&M, so as you can see, it's included in all of them. The initial tariff payments, so monthly payments in this regard, the PPA payments and monthly battery payment, here only PPA payments. The minimum energy offtake, so as listed by the various proposals, and the contract terms. Just as a note here, this one is 20 years. So the contract terms for each of these offers. So essentially, yeah, this was the process followed up to this point. It's, as you can see, it's very involved process. There's a lot of variables, slight changes can affect the whole model. So we aim to create, like I said, a level playing field. We ended up with our preferred tenderer. Just a short summary of a few technical items that we noted in comparison with these two tenderers as well is the finalized system sizes where we were relatively close together. The only differences we can see here, for example, is generally the standard capacities or sizes available on the market. The fact that the one tenderer has got a containerized solution compared to the other tenderer that has a freestanding solution for the battery plant, as well as the key where the PV plant will be installed and the generator, diesel generator being included in the proposals. Another few, so we listed all the key technical items here, a few points to focus on. First of all, I just want to take you through is once again the system sizes we just discussed, the fact that the module manufacturers are both tier 1 manufacturers listed on the Bloomberg list. Another important note to take here is the fact that the inverters are well-known suppliers in the market, in our industry. The ATIS environment and the SunGrow environments are some of the most used manufacturers in the market, which gives us a degree of comfort. The sizes of the inverters is noted here as well. Important to note is inverter warranties under these contracts. For example, just as a note, something that I glossed over, out of a PPA 20-year agreement at any point in time after the initial period, which is usually 3 to 5 years, the golf club can decide to buy out of this contract. So it's important to know that the technology you're working with, at any time, should you wish to change your mind and rather run and operate the plant yourself, you want a stable technology, well-known technology with a reputable manufacturer with warranties in place. So something that we looked at here as well. And then something important to note here is under Tenderer 1, we have the additional benefit offered in the technology that power quality correction is something that will be actively addressed for the clubhouse. So when we talk about power quality in a nutshell, first of all, as a power factor consideration, I'm not going to go into too much detail. The only thing that I need to point out is your power factor, it needs to be usually between above 0.95. Anything below that, you start falling to 0.9, etc., you get additional bills from municipalities. Tshwane doesn't necessarily bill that at the moment, but they might actually in the future implement it in the city of Joburg. So they bill you essentially for your power quality. The fact that you have got a large reactive power component, I don't expect to go into too much detail on reactive power component, but it's not real power essentially. It's power that items or hardware introduces into the system that causes ESCOM to cater for a higher demand that you're actually using. That's why they penalize you. Another consideration is the fact that the clubhouse is charged a maximum demand tariff on a monthly basis. So your maximum demand is something dependent also on your power factor or power quality in this case. So the better your power quality, your power factor will your maximum demand will much more closely be aligned with your actual power usage. So you can end up saving energy in that as well. That's why this power quality is a very important consideration. It's something that's included in the plant. Another important note here as well is it allows your equipment such as televisions, sensitive electronic equipment to last longer because it's not being exposed to the poor power quality we experience on the South African grid. And that is essentially, in a nutshell, what we discussed under the technical components. Feel free to review it at your own leisure. The last note I just wanted to add here is, as we said, a few technical notes here is, first of all, they're both lithium ferrophosphate batteries offered for both tenderers. Once again, the same manufacturers as listed previously. The only reason there's really a size difference here is the fact that the manufacturers differ in their standard sizes they offer to the market. So the results from all of these processes and simulations was the following. We've assessed the net present value here of all the options offered by the two tenderers, with the variable PPA from tenderer 1 emerging as the clear favorite in terms of performance expectancy over 20 years. So just once again, as I said previously, the net present value we've used here are values based on our consideration for absorption of energy produced by the solar plant. This is your kicking off point, as we've discussed with the Golf Club as well. This is considered the lowest point of performance from our side. You only expect it to improve from here. And that's why we didn't consider it a feasibility review, essentially, just rather than an education tool. So tenderer 1 was then selected as the preferred tenderer, and from this, Ben will provide further information if there's on the process followed at the contract stage. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there it is. All right. I think everybody knows me, but I'm Per, and President Per. So I will try to take you through the whole process, starting somewhere in the middle of the year, and go through the business case and scope of supply and so forth, and where we are right now. This is an information meeting, and if everything goes well, we are planning to have an informal, special general meeting where we will take the decisions in 2 to 3 weeks' time, hopefully before Christmas, and that will be completely virtual. So the first thing I want to go through with you is is our risk profile. Because as Jonker indicated, it is not a given which option you shall go for among all these financing solutions. But for the club, we can take a long-term view. We can safely assume that the club will be here the next few decades. We are not a manufacturing facility which are subject to market acceptance of your products and so forth. We are here as an estate, and we will be here, so we can take a long-term risk. There is no risk that the cloud will cease to exist. We will always be depending on efficient and relatively cheap or acceptable, at least, cost of electricity, because it is a huge portion of our cost base. We are not set up for maintaining and operating of electricity hardware. And we have the objective to minimize or rather curb the yearly increase of to define minimal increase rate for the electricity cost over time. It changed a little bit during the last few years when we had load shedding at the most, even if we were not subject to it here in the clubhouse, you had a kind of time span of 2-3 hours which you wanted to come through. When that now is disappeared, it's much more important to look at the long-term cost development. So that became the main objective for this whole exercise. We have a relatively strong balance sheet, but we are not strong in terms of cash reserves. We are generating cash, but not to the extent that we can pay for and invest upfront in a solar PV plant. We, of course, prefer to pay for kilowatt hours produced and consumed, not anything else. And that risk profile indicates that we should be okay to take a risk on a power purchase agreement over a period of 20 years. It has been considered by our Audit and Risk Committee, and they would be satisfied, of course, subject to what is there in the PPA solution. Now, Jonker have talked about it extensively already, but this is the kind of the philosophy behind how we have designed the system. We want the solar PV system to basically provide power at the cheapest possible rate without oversizing and so forth. Business should be uninterrupted, and we, as a last resort, will have a diesel generator. That was also not a given from the starting point, but we have noticed that when we have now outages, they can be long. 1 day, 2 days, sometimes. So we need backup should we have, for example, rain and cloudy conditions over a few days, and at the same time having no power from the grid. Limiting maximum demand. Jonker talked about that also. We can do a reduction of that from 240 kVA to 90 kVA, which is also contributing to the cost savings for the club. And use only grid when the rates are less expensive. I will show you exactly how it looks like. We have a highly variable consumption of electricity over a 24-hour period. And this is how it looks like over 7 days or so. You see the ups and downs. This is, of course, the night, and this is the days. And you see a tendency of 2 peaks. That is the morning peak and the evening peak. And we have seen that we need to have the maximum consumption at peak hour is most probably on a Friday or a Saturday, is in the order of 200 kilowatts. And that's the same if we measure either a kilowatt or kilowatt hours. Now, the negotiation process, we want to talk about the beginning of it. And let me go back only to the situation we had approximately in end of June. Then we had a bidder who gave us a very, very attractive PPA rate per kilowatt hour in his tender. Okay. So the group, which has been a working group between the club and the homeowners association, been supported by Bureau, we decided to initiate negotiations with this supplier. We had a PPA rate of in the order of 150 rand per kilowatt hour. When the PPA came after quite a long time, it was about 2. And checking that a couple of times, it was not possible to have a confirmation in the PPA as we had in the tender. So we had to change to another bidder because the final attempt to receive a PPA reflecting the final offer made in September, however, it was not successful. So we opened negotiations with the second bidder on the short list, and we have now received a term sheet which is reflecting the final offer from the bidder. Was received in the beginning of November and signed by us. A process which has been very tedious, time-consuming, and complex, with a large number of technical, commercial, financial, and legal issues, have come to a kind of end. So, what is the result? The preferred supplier is a company called Effective Energy Solutions, EEC. And he is the owner of that company. He's sitting with us here. It is Chris Saxon, who is also a director on the Homeowners Association's board. And as you can understand, we have had a very sensitive process in the sense that one of the bidders and the eventually successful bidder is a homeowner in the club and officially the homeowners owning and managing this company called EEC. We have been extremely strict in terms of governance of the procurement process. That was a must and is a must, and sometimes maybe we have even mishandled Chris because we have had to ask him to leave, for example, the board of directors meetings at homeowners when I was reporting about the progress in this process. But I'm confident and I'm comfortable with that we have not given Chris any unfair advantage. And as you understand, up to August, he was not the preferred supplier. It was another bidder with another financial institution. Now, EEC offer on the table is sitting at 9.3 million rand as a capex solution consisting of the solar PV plant, the battery storage system, and a DC generator of 350 kVA. The detailed scope of supply you can read here. On the solar PV side is panels and cables and connectors and charge controllers and carport and rooftop mounting structures. I will show you pictures of this just now. We have a battery storage system with battery units, chargers, rectifiers, a container, a 12-meter long container, which is covering, including and hosting both inverted rectifiers and the battery, including fire suppression and surge and lightning protection and so forth. We have balance on plant, where you see the the diesel generator included, and all the cabling and project management and so forth. And this is maybe more easy to grasp. This is the red areas here is where the solar panels are to be included. In the beginning, we had the idea that we could install solar panels also on this side of the car park. But there is a tree line here which will shade the solar panels, reducing the efficiency and the production of energy from the solar panels. So we had to decide we have to use only this side and instead maximize the installation on the roof. And that decision we could take, because as you remember, in the meantime, we had come to the conclusion that there is no appetite to build and construct a first floor in the clubhouse. The two were connected. We talked about it a couple of times. That, of course, had we built a first floor on the clubhouse, the amount of panels here would most probably be less or substantially less. So this is now the installation of the solar cells on the car park and on the roof. And you can even see here there is a graph bar here where you can measure and you get a feeling for the efficiency and output from the solar panels that you see slightly reddish here, which is coming from the tree line on this side, but we can live with that. This is the carport design. It is always where you as customers and guests to the clubhouse will meet this solar installation. And we have talked quite a lot about what is the most efficient carport structure in order to avoid conflict between an opening door from the car and this structure. And this has been selected as the most efficient way of installing the solar panels without having a conflict with opening doors. Solar panels, 800 of them. I think it is 810. It's of the most modern design I think there are. The heterojunction module means that there are a combination of two semiconductors, which is increasing the efficiency to this level, 22.4, as well as also being heat resistant. Sometimes in the summer, as you know, we have 30, 35 degrees, and these solar panels will be hot. And if you use other types of them, again, we have a degradation of the output. We have seen during this year, we have seen a substantial increase in the output from each panel. When we started, this output range was below 500. It has increased with at least 10% within the last 12 months. Here is how the battery inverter looks like. Here you have the rectifier, and as Jonker touched upon, this system is built in such a way that all incoming energy, be it from the solar cells, or be it from the grid, or be it from the diesel generator, is fed into the battery. So even the grid voltage is rectified, goes into the battery, and we draw electricity only from the battery, which is of course a guarantee for the high quality, which John talked about. That's the battery built in stacks. It will be included and installed in the container. You can see here that we have a 10-year product warranty and 15-year life expectancy that need to be taken into account. As a risk, of course, the controller for the solar charge going into the battery. And there you see the container with the battery on one side and the various electronic cubicles on the other side. Diesel generator, 385 kVA standbys. Our current one is 100. So it's a considerable increase in our diesel generator capacity. Now, this is maybe where the crux, where the most interesting things are. I hope this is visible for all of you here, as well as also looking at the streaming. The load here is this curve. This is the energy which we are using during a 24-hour on a Monday. This is the production from the solar cells. This is how the charge level of the battery is looking like. And let's start here now at 5 o'clock in the morning. We still have no solar cell production. We just have the battery to go for it. We are draining that to a certain extent until the solar production is coming up and increasing the charge in the battery. And we can live on the battery until, not only until the sun goes down and the production of the solar cell stops, we can live on that until in the order of between 8 and 9 in the evening. And the only thing we need to buy from the grid are these green bars. And that's exactly where we have the low cost rate for electricity from the municipality. And on a 7 days basis, it looks like this, as you see it up and down every single day. And it's very similar from day to day. If I go to this one, you see how we are using and cost and paying for energy coming from the grid. The red ones, the red bars here, is the peak level times between 6 and 7 in the morning and between 5 and 7 in the afternoon. This is daytime rate, and the black ones are nighttime rate. This is after the system is installed. We only buy electricity from the municipality during nighttime. And if you look at it in terms of kilowatt hour cost per day, the green ones are without the system as it is today. And as you can see, we are in the order of 10,000. We consume electricity to the tune of 10,000 rand per day or more. Our yearly cost this year is about 4 million. If we install after installation, we will have this level paid to the municipality. And looking at, we will see how the account actually will look like just now. Now, this kind of system can and should be managed. So there is a power management system included in the supply, where we can have different views. We can look at the whole system in terms of where we are and see where the energy is coming from. I'm sure for those of you who have a solar cells at home, you have a picture like this, maybe. We can look at the power levels. We can look at how it works for the battery, and we have numerical data for generated energy, total consumption, how much the battery is charged and discharging, input from the grid, etc., etc. And of course, that can be screened somewhere here in various places in the clubhouse, as well as also on the officials' cell phones. Because what we are doing is basically the electricity peak shaving. We are taking out the big peaks using the solar energy coming in during daytime and distributing it to the at least the full day, as well as also the peak hours during the morning and during evening. And here you can see the account. Sorry. This is a simulation of how the account would look like this year, kind of 4 million. We will pay 920,000 after the installation. So you can easily do the math, take round that off to 1 million to the council and 2 million for the PPA. 220 times 1 million kilowatt hours per year gives us a cost of 3 million instead of 4.1, 4.2. Already there we have a saving of 1 million. And as Jocke showed you, we will have an escalation clause of, it will most probably be CPI plus 2%, not the fixed 6% or 7%. It will be CPI plus 2%. And right now, we have a reasonably good CPI. And we can speculate, any one of us, what is the future increases from the municipality in terms of electricity tariffs. Now, Jocke and I have talked about a power purchase agreement. How is it structured? Here you have EPC, Effectual Energy Consultants, EEC, Chris' company. He is building the plant, supplying all the material, building it, and constructing it on a contract with a company called Sunex. And Sunex is a group within a group called Jaltec, which is an investment fund management company. They are taking in money from other, mostly individuals, and investing them in projects like this, creating benefits for them, not only from the plant. In many cases, it's also a lot of tax benefits. And especially here, it's a benefit coming from the tax legislation called 12B. The investors here can make use of a deduction in their income tax coming from this plant. So the Jaltec group holds or is home to the development company who is using EEC for building the plant. Then another partner in the Jaltec group is signing the PPA with us. And that's the contract based on which we are buying and paying for electricity in the future. On top of that, we will have an operation and maintenance contract with Sunex. Because as you heard from Jocke, operation and maintenance is during the term of the PPA done and the responsibility of Sunex, who I guess most probably will subcontract to EEC the technical and physical support on site. A little bit complicated, but if you look at it in this way, it's reasonably simple with 3 players: the EPC player, the electricity provider, and the electricity buyer. Because what we actually do behind all these figures and tables and criteria and so on, the only thing we do is that we shift electricity supply from the municipality to another entity. And we are reaping the benefits from that. So we will procure electricity from the owner of the solar plant, and the owner and taking the risk during the term is Sunex. The owner will also be responsible for operation and maintenance Our current total energy consumption is 1 million, a little bit more, kilowatt hours. And the minimum offtake under the PPA is estimated to be in the order of 800,000 kilowatt hours, 80% of the total consumption. The solar PPA rate will be 1.07 per kilowatt hour for the solar part, and a fixed fee of 79,000 per month for the battery and converter electronics. If we convert that to a total equivalent tariff for the complete plant, it will be approximately 220 kilowatt hours. And you heard the figures from Jonker where we are today, varying between 350 and 7. Estimated saving in year one, 900,000, and net present value of savings in total 15 million calculated over 20 years. And the project is cash positive from year one. And of course, that's the best figure of all, because here is our projected cost, total cost for electricity in the future. And here is electricity cost without the system. So the current status as we stand right now here today, Jaltech Investment Committee has approved the project conditionally during the course of this week. And we have just received a PPA draft, which we need to review and complete and make final. We have signed a term sheet a couple of days back, which is including the most principal data in the PPA, but there is no commitment here. It's only giving Jaltech a 90 days exclusivity for negotiation with the club. So what is the next step? Well, I mentioned we are planning a special general meeting in the beginning of December. And I think, Kevin, we have been tentatively talking about December 10th. Yeah. That will be held virtually in the same manner as homeowners had their AGM in August. And there will be basically only one decision to take on that SGM. And that are the decisions related to the solar project. And decisions to be tabled, roughly worded, is that the Sports and Social Club change electricity supply from the municipality to the proposed scheme with Jaltech. That the management board is authorized to go into final negotiations with the EPC and the Jaltech group of companies. And that the management board is authorized to sign all necessary documents once they are acceptable and reviewed, stroke approved by our legal advisor. That's why we have made this presentation quite extensive, and thank you for listening, I have to say. And you can see there is a lot of technical, commercial, financial data and terminology and so forth, which none of us maybe are working with data. But that will go into the package based on which we will ask you to take the decisions at the SGM on then December 10th. All right, that's it regarding solar. Shall we take questions?
Well, maybe just an observation. I mean, this is an excellent presentation. I must give you guys credit. This is really done properly.
Thank you.
But there's an option in terms of the. So all that I'm saying, there's an option for the homeowners, the Sports and Social Club, actually to talk to Yaltec to take an equity participation in that structure that then gives you upside in the equity returns over the longer period. Because if you look at it initially, you've shown the PPA as a relatively flat curve over the full period of 20 years. Whereas if you negotiate with Yaltec to participate on an equity participation in that structure, it will give you an upside and actually gives you a better return over the full period. But otherwise, this is an excellent presentation.
Are you saying, Donna, that we should be an equity holder in this company?
Yeah. So those type of structures are available in the market, where you provide your off-taker actually with a participation right by terms of an equity. So you take a 30% equity or whatever. Yes, it's got a bit of a capital outlay, but it gives you a much better return over the long term.
Okay.
It's just
Peter?
So you have to put in capital.
a relatively small component, but it gives you the upside of that.
We should discuss that with Yaltec, if that is an option. And Rob?
It will complicate matters.
I think so too, but
Because immediately homeowners are going to be involved. I think it might complicate matters because homeowners now is going to need to be part of this whole equity decision. It's my gut feel. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that I really think it is. I would say because nothing to ask questions.
No, exactly. Let's take your point and work with it a little bit. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, just the size of the generator. I see you peak at around 200 kVA. Why such a big generator? It's just to make 100% sure that it's all covered when there's a breakdown.
Yeah.
And the solar system I produce is, I assume, is not good enough just for the backup.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you have the worst case, you have cloudy conditions, rain, and a long power outage for days. That's when you need a big diesel generator.
But your generator cost per kilowatt hour is probably in the region of about 12 Rand per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
I've got a similar system to that, 350, and it runs around 700-800 Rand an hour.
Absolutely.
It's at 35 liters idly.
We hope that we will never have to use it.
No, it's quite an expensive, but
It's included in the package. What question there?
No, just Mate, just on the generator, what we must also remember is it's going well now with electricity, but it does not mean it will always go well. So if we do this now, we have contingency. Should there be long power outages? Yes, it's going to be expensive, but it's going to be an option.
Okay. Okay. Have I presented it correctly, Chris?
Yeah, the generators also needs to charge the battery, so that's one thing to consider and supply.
That's right. That's right. Yes, please.
Can I ask why, just a bit of a different point, why we decided to go virtual? I mean, well, I must have been involved in a couple of AGMs and in other properties, and mostly, and I think the state has also always done it that way, that you have a virtual as well as an attendance option. I did find the fact that it was only virtual quite restrictive. If you need to type, you don't have the opportunity to actually talk. I think it's a bit one-sided, specifically if you feel that the information is being shared, it's not necessarily the right information. So I'm curious about the fact that we've now decided to go virtual for all our meetings.
No, we have not decided to do virtual all our meetings based on the very clear success of the AGM for homeowners in August, where we had a record participation from the members, and we also had a record amount of questions and comments coming through the system. We have decided in both units to have AGMs and SGMs virtual, but information meetings face to face, as we have today.
Now, that's what really answers my question. So I'm asking why can't it be virtual as well as attendance? We should have the same levels of participation.
Yeah, I know that that option exists. And we shall maybe explore that, Jaco, both for homeowners as well as also for.
And it's also not addressing my concern that if it's only virtual, it makes it very difficult if you have to type and you disagree with what's happening.
Okay.
So it's very one-sided.
Okay. Okay. Point taken. Point taken. We will look at that. All right. Because if there is no more questions, I will hand over to Gavin, who will give you a brief update where we are regarding the pedal. I hope you saw the big blown up drawings, the engineering drawings, which are now available for the pedal, and which are the basis for submission to the council. But Gavin will give you all the details here.
All right, thank you, Ilke and Pat. Appreciate it. And okay, just as Pat mentioned, a very quick panel update. Obviously, just what we did is obviously it was approved by the homeowners in August, but there was a lot of things that we needed to do based on that approval. So the most important thing was to get to, or the biggest question, obviously the most important thing for us was the noise mitigation. So what we have done is we've employed an acoustic engineer. I think that's the correct title. So he was appointed by the club, and what he's done sort of put out his relevant tools and products on both on the side of the 10th fairway as well as on the Centurion Drive side. So he's been analyzing that, and the main purpose of that was to ensure that residents that are in the vicinity of the paddle courts are sort of not neglected and obviously unnecessarily inconvenienced. There's a decibel, I think it's 55, we need to reach within 55 decibels at most. So that is the objective that the acoustic engineer is analyzing, and the objective of that is to ensure that he gives enough information to the architects that they can design the necessary adjustments to make sure that we actually mitigate the noise. So that thing he's been on site, he's analyzing it. The architects are in consultation with him at the moment. So I can't give you exact answers on how we're doing it, but we will, the next step is once we get some feedback from both architects and the acoustic engineer, we're going to be engaging with all necessary residents to get them involved to understand, so they're fully briefed on what we're doing. That's obviously before we can actually get any approvals from anything else. The one element as far as the council submission goes, we can't just submit a full plan at the moment. We do need to submit a thing called a way leave application. That is because we need to move the road. It is, as the homeowners will know, that the road is a public road, so we do need to go through an application process of that. So there is a bit of a time process, and obviously time of year doesn't lend itself in our favour, but we're doing what we can to make sure we understand. The appropriate engineers have been appointed to ensure that we get the right information when we submit it. So the way leave application is at council at the moment. So we're waiting for feedback from council on that. The rest is, as Pat mentioned, we've done some drawings. We've pretty much ticked most of the boxes, I think, from that. Obviously waiting for the noise. That's the only thing we haven't done yet. But the rest of the layout is, as you can see, and it's pretty much simple. If all goes to plan, all the noise mitigation, way leave applications, council, etc., we would like to start breaking ground in approximately April next year. So with the intention that we can hopefully open for play and use September, October in 2026. So that's pretty much where we are on the paddle. So it's quick, short, to the point, just that answers all the necessary. Okay. Are there any questions on that?
Okay, but don't worry, my voice will carry. Can I ask the quick, once more day is finished with that, the sound engineer, once it's finished with that report, be released to specifically the residents that affected.
No, we're definitely going to be communicating. Yeah. So the first thing, as I said, we're going to talk to the residents affected, which you are one of them, and then that'll be the first step, and then we will communicate to the broader community.
Thanks, Kevin. Rakesh, to see the close. Pricing on court bookings and all of that, I assume will be done later, or you'll have provisional numbers for us now?
I don't have provisional numbers, but as we committed that residents and obviously members, that we membership preferential rate. So I can't confirm the exact number at the moment, but that will announce probably the first half of next year in advance. Anything else? All right, thank you. The last little point, Paz is going to quickly touch on update on the strategy.
All right. We felt that it is important that we give you a feedback on what is happening on the strategic development for the club. As you will recall, we presented at the APM for the club in May a multi-year long-term strategy up to 2030 for the club, and which covered basically all aspects except CapEx. I had a pretty extensive presentation of what has happened in the strategic development space for the club, as well as also what we were looking at for the next few years. However, in July, we had an unusually high level of uncertainty. We have lack of clear decision-making processes between the homeowners and the club, which make it very difficult, if not even impossible, to present and develop any major CapEx projects for the club. We had an uncertain future for the paddle courts and the arena link. We had, and we still have, the uncertainty created by the 12-hole legal case. We had a strained financial result for the club, mostly due to the flooding events during the first half of the 2025, as well as, of course, the cost related to the legal case. So when we started to work on that, and Peter has taken over my role as driving the strategic development, one of the first decisions we took was to shorten the strategic horizon from 5 years to 3 years. With the dynamic world we are living in, it was a little bit too ambitious to try to look 5 years down the road. Let's see if we can look 3 years down the road, Peter. So that is the development which has happened since then. Now, where are we now? We have actually achieved a lot of things. We have achieved a complete clarification of the decision-making processes governing both the club and the homeowners in terms of capital investments. And there have been various meetings on that. We have had an information meeting here with Advocate Lober, who told you about the interpretation of all the documents which we have, constitutions, MOIs, cooperation agreements, and so forth. We have an increased social fee from the members via homeowners. The paddle court complex has been approved. The arena link implementation is approved, which means that these are no longer strategic issues. The strategic issue we have for these two is how do we leverage during the next few years the fact that we have these infrastructure installations in terms of member fees and participation from members and so forth. And we also are reasonably clear on that the clubhouse development will follow the most recent member survey. It's something called option 3 in that. We will give it a different name as we go along, but it's reasonably clear which one is preferred by the members. Still outstanding is the legal process for 12th hole, and outstanding also stabilization of the finances of the club. And it's still motivating the moratorium of major capex in the clubhouse during this year and the next financial year. We are right now discussing the budget for next financial year, and I am pretty certain there will be no major capex projects implemented during that year in the clubhouse. We have to get clarity and find out how we shall fund whatever we do in the clubhouse. However, we can look forward to the next 3 years. And as I said, we are currently developing a strategy up to the financial year 28-29. And that will include major clubhouse development, including options for finance. We are in such a situation now that we have a much more stable platform to stand on. And that strategy will, of course, be subject to the defined decision-making processes between homeowners and the club. It will be presented, as we see it now, at an information meeting in March, April, and then tabled at the AGM in May 2026 for consideration and approval. That's where we are regarding the strategy. All right. That brings to an end our program for today. Any questions, comments on these 3 subjects or anything else? Let me comment on one issue, which I know is maybe bothering some of our members. I have written about it in a couple of my letters, and I mentioned it here, that we need to improve the financial result for the club. We are now sitting at a turnover of in the order of 50-55 million rand per year, but in the best case, we will maybe become close to 0 before the end of this financial year. We had a very good October, with a great financial net profit, but we need to become even better. So I have pushed for, and we have agreed in both boards, that we will have a task force or a working group or whatever we call it, with members from both homeowners as well as also from the club, looking through where we are and how we are doing things in the club. Do benchmarking with other clubs, be creative and challenge the way we have been doing things for 20, 30 years and so forth, in order to create and feed into the budget for next year good ideas which can improve our financial results in a completely transparent and open way. That is what is going on right now. It's a combined effort from both entities in order to try to understand how can we improve and get a more sustainable situation for the finance result of the club. I wrote in one of my letters during the year that I think our cash generation is too weak. Even if it is positive, we need to have a cash generation of 3, 4, maybe even 5 million rand per year in order to be able to support investment programs, multi-year investment programs of in the order of 20-30 million, which is needed for the club. So that's why I'm saying we have to find this out, and there's a task force working on that right now in order to try to understand what we can do better. I hope that alleviates some members' concerns about what we are doing. All right. Anything else? Thank you to all of you who have been looking at the stream version of it. Thank you very much.
Just being led, but under promise and over.
Another one response to your thing about I usually do that. Everyone gets scared because I give a PowerPoint with all the information.
Ek gaan nie weet, my vrou was goed.
Ek weet ek ook wat se dit is wat ek weet van as
You can't test drive anything until Tuesday.
at least we know each other.
No, you'll see me on Tuesday. Okay.
Dit was nou seker was gesien dan die ons kyk vir die stel as dit